Sorry in advance if this video is a lot more rough around the edges than my normal videos. Not to say that my other videos are any better, because I don't think they are personally. But I think I want to work on being able to speak in the moment and off the cuff a lot better, and rely a lot less heavily on things I've already written down and reading from a script. Because one, I stream, shameless plug, and two, I also just want to work on my nerves and stuff like that. But also just in general, I want to be able to do this full time. And I think being able to talk more freely, more comfortably without such a rigid script that I like meticulously write out and like slave over will like help me do that better. I think in general, because like I'm still so early on in a lot of this, I should get comfortable making mistakes now, because this is a perfect time to make mistakes. It is okay for me to make mistakes now because there's less people seeing it, there's less people watching it, and I need to get over the fear of making those mistakes creatively, because something could be bad and you can always improve upon it, you know, and that's okay. You know, you can always make something better. So, I mean, with that out of the way, I think something I wanted to talk about is based on this essay that I wrote a long time ago that is anecdotal about how pervasive systemic racism can be, and just is in general. In previous videos, I've talked about how just because you are a part of a quote-unquote group within, or minority group, you are not like unable to be sort of influenced by these insidious systems that we live under. Like, that's why you can have like a Candace Owens who will methodically speak against her own or Black people's own best interests at the behest of a larger system that exploits her, and is just using her as a mouthpiece for, like, she's the token Black, essentially. Like, she will always be able to be, oh, well, this Black person agrees that like BLM is awful and terrible, but like, you could make a entire video about like what is wrong with BLM, the like organization, not the actual movement, whatever. Essentially, no one is greater than the system that we live under. You know, we all can unfortunately do its bidding, even unconsciously, and be influenced by it and do damage to ourselves based on these sort of systems. And in the essay that like I'll like read bits and pieces of, because again, like I want to work on being able to speak more freely and not be put in a box by my own scripts, whatever. A very personal like example that I can give about like how insidious these systems, I know I keep saying systems, sorry, but like, and how insidious all of this can be is like, for me personally, like around middle school, I felt like a very genuine sort of, I thought at the time it was contempt, but like looking back on it, I think it was like a very deep sadness about my Blackness, or like even better to say, a sense of defeat at what I can't change. Obviously, Black people aren't a monolith, but I think it is very common, especially for minorities, to sort of get this general sort of spoken or even unspoken conversation that like you can kind of do anything you want in life except overcome being like a minority, you know. Like, obviously, again, I don't speak for all Black people, and I damn sure don't speak for all minorities, but like at least, and I guess like I'll just go back to my own personal experiences, but like, you know, growing up, like my family was never like, you can't do anything, or like it wasn't like an out loud, you know, be realistic, but it was like, it was never like, especially growing up in the early 2000s, it was never like, oh, you can't be president, but like be for real, you know what I mean? Like, this was before Barack Obama was president, you know. So like there was this sort of understanding that like, because this is America, because you're Black, you know, and you're a Black man, you need to temper your expectations accordingly to society, unfortunately. And you can chalk that up to generational trauma, or just being unfortunately realistic, or what may have you. So even even as a child, well, as child as like middle school can be. I mean, that is a child, but like, you know, not a child, whatever. So even as like a child, I understood, even on a sort of surface level, what it is like to be black and just that sort of discomfort that can kind of come with being black. And because of this sort of discomfort that I felt that being black was more trouble than it was worth. You know what I mean? Like, there was no upside or benefits to being black. I obviously don't think that way anymore, but like growing up, I felt that way. I felt genuinely like, what's the point? Like, I'm at a constant disadvantage. And of course, you know, if you read a book or pay attention to society at all, of course there's disadvantages to being a minority in society. But with that being said, there's obviously like great benefits, and you know, it's just awesome being black. But I digress. I was aware of my blackness, especially as someone who, you know, if you looked at me, I'm a big dude. I'm quite large. I know I use an avatar, but like, just kind of got to take my word for it. It is not uncommon for people, before they talk to me and realize that I'm like quite a nice and gentle person, to be like, oh yeah, I was scared of you, and if we got into a fight, like, you know, like, I'm not fighting you fair, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, any big dude has had that conversation with another man, you know, like, I wouldn't fight you fair if we got into a fight kind of conversation. So yeah, so because of like the fact that like I'm a big dude, but also like I'm a big black dude, even as young as like 10, 11, 12, society decided for me that I was a man, you know what I mean? Like, not mentally, but physically, because as soon as you are adult enough to intimidate a white person or a cop, you're unfortunately a man now, as far as like it goes in America. Being black, unfortunately, ages young black boys long before their time. Anyway, so like, my blackness felt like a burden forced upon me without my consent, and this mindset definitely carried on over into high school, so much so that like I actively sought out schools on the other side of my city where the demographics were more white compared to my previous schools, where that were obviously predominantly black, Hispanic, etc., because I wanted to be a part of or maybe I wanted to experience what it's like to, I guess, just be around white people. I don't know what my logic was back then, but I just know that I wanted to be part of a minority instead of a majority like I was used to. And I got my wish, so to say. You know, like, my schools were pretty diverse, fortunately, and which I'm grateful for looking back on it. But I definitely got my wish where like there was more white people instead of like being predominantly black and brown. And looking back, no one ever actively asked me to, or even really said anything about it, honestly. But I vividly remember always doing my best to not seem ghetto around my friends, whatever that means. You know what I mean? Like, I always made sure to try to pronounce words as correctly as possible. Obviously, like, when you grow up sort of like in an environment where everyone talks exactly like you do, whether at home or, you know, you come from the same environment, you don't even necessarily realize that like you talk funny until like you realize, or you talk to other people from a different background and you're like, oh, I say that word very much differently than you say that word. And again, no one made fun of me or like, you know, and if they did, like, it was in like passing, or like it was very like innocent. Like, no one like looked at me as like I wasn't their equal in any way, shape, or form. But it was definitely something I was hyper aware of and unfortunately uncomfortable with. So I would go out of my way to make sure I limited using AAVE, which is a valid and real dialect, by the way, and even going as far as to change my mannerisms and stuff like that I definitely thought were normal. I mean, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, of course, but learning that it's okay to be yourself authentically, and you aren't lesser because like socially you are taught that like everything white is right, and like everything predominantly sort of expected or done by black people is wrong. It's a lot like unlearning what aspects of the patriarchy genuinely like affect you and are genuinely harming your life. It becomes like this genuine sort of eye opener, like, oh, oh, that's what I'm upset about, or like that's the thing that's been affecting me this entire time. And now that you have the vocabulary for it, it definitely becomes like this sort of like a light bulb in your head once you realize it. And looking back on it, it's definitely heartbreaking, because again, like that pressure or that anxiety was definitely, it came from somewhere, but also like it was invisible because no one made me to feel lesser or wrong or bad in any way, shape, or form. But I had this notion that like if people perceived me in even a small way as being ghetto or not as refined, quote unquote, as them, I won't be as smart and I won't be taken seriously. And honestly, I don't think any child, teenager, kid, whatever, young adult, I don't think anyone genuinely should have to worry about if the people older than them or like the people that are supposed to guide them through life should have to worry about if the adults in their life view them as like lesser simply because they come from a different background. Even though unfortunately that is common, like that happens, but it shouldn't be a thing, you know? No child should wonder if they're like the aspects of themselves that they can't change, like their race or religion, makes others uncomfortable. My existence, or especially a child's existence of being black or Muslim or anything, they shouldn't have to worry if like the adult who keeps giving them looks makes them uncomfortable, you know? Anyway, I think essentially like that's what I'm trying to get at in this rambly ass video, is that like that's the perversion of like society that we all have to function under. It's this very insidious thing that like a lot of the times you can't even really explain why you feel how you feel about certain things, but you just feel strongly about them. And once that is flipped on its head, it's like, well, what do I do now, you know? Because like having biases flipped on its head and having biases flipped on its head leaves a space in you, I guess, to say the least. And maybe this is too simplistic, but like once you realize or like are taught that like something you believed all your entire life and never questioned is actually the wrong thing, it's like, oh, well then what? You know what I mean? Like how do you cope with being told that your reality is wrong? You know, like what if Neo got out of that tank or whatever and was actually like, no. So like actually back in that pod there, that's actually reality. This is the fake stuff, you know, like it would be like, no, wait, no. But I just woke up. So like this should be the real. No. Back in the pod is the real stuff. This is you imagining all of this. I know I'm rambling a lot. I don't know. I wanted to get like all of my thoughts out because like when I write a script, I feel like I have to stick to the script so strictly that I feel constricted by it, you know, like that I have to stick within this box of my own creation. And I don't want to do that all the time. Like obviously I want to, you know, ramble but also like write scripts sometimes that I like stick to. But like I feel like with like topics like that require a lot of nuance and stuff like that, I want to be able to just ramble a little bit because I want all of my content, like when it's serious, to come from the perspective that like I'm just a regular dude who wants to be a good person and is trying to learn and grow and try to be better and figure it out as he goes. And I want, even if not a whole lot of people see this, I want people to come along that journey with me as I learn. And I hope that like I can in a way like extend the ladder as I go up to others, in hopes that like, you know, they go on their own journey of like self-discovery, or like, oh, you know, like that's what the patriarchy is, or like that's what like racism is, like beyond like just these sort of like concepts or words that like are thrown around on the internet and in society. Yeah, I don't know, like I guess like I want to think of myself as like kind of like how Joe Rogan used to think of himself, like a dumbass who just wants to ask questions. I'm kind of like that, whereas like I just want to be a good person, ask some questions, figure it out as I go, and try to make the world a better place within my sphere of influence. Anyway, in an attempt to conclude my diatribe, I think I just want to end things by saying like, if I could go back in time and talk to a younger version of myself and say, there's nothing wrong with using AAVE, being ghetto, quote unquote, does not dictate anything about you other than the environment you grew up in. And that same environment is the environment your family found a way to thrive as best as they could in, and you should never be ashamed of perseverance. Anyway, thanks for listening.